Just do something to tell you who I am, you know?
One of the biggest stumbling blocks when it comes to bodyweight training that people hit is how do you quantify how hard you're working? With weights, we've got these numbers that we can associate with, like, okay, I'm lifting 30 pounds versus 40 pounds, or how much is on the bar, and so on. So the question then is, like, how do you quantify these things? Like in convict conditioning, how do you know if there's more weight on this arm versus this with the medicine ball push-ups and so on? Well, there's definitely a point to this whole thing, because quantification is very important. We want to be able to measure our progress in order to ensure that we're doing something that's productive. So the question is, how do you quantify bodyweight training? Well, there's two ways we can look at this. Number one is position of your body and your technique is always a way that you can quantify it. So one of the things you can do with suspension training is lay some sort of a measuring system down on the floor. So the angle that your body is at is how much resistance you can have. So I took a tape measure, put it on the floor, and then when I looked at my workout log, it was like, okay, I'm doing curls with my toes at the 33-inch mark. And then if I knew it was 30 inches, then it was more resistance. The other thing you can do, is Paul Wade talks about in convict conditioning, is if you're doing things like handstand push-ups or, you know, outrigger push-ups where you got one hand out to the side, make marks on the floor, put tape down on the floor, so that way you can know exactly where your hands are and you can move it out further over time. But here's the main lesson I want to drive home for you today, which is the fact of, even though we think that weight training is easier to quantify, there's always far more in the realm of exercise and fitness in general that we can't quantify. So yes, we can quantify the actual weight that you're lifting, but that doesn't necessarily mean we can quantify the tension on the muscles. And I've talked about this before, where people will often have more weight that they're lifting, but they'll change their technique in order to do that. So effectively what they're doing is they're making their technique easier to lift heavier weight, but the tension on the muscle isn't really that different, and ultimately it's that tension on the muscle that's the most important thing. Then we've got other things that are hard to quantify, such as rest, quality of rest, how hard you're working during a particular set, what's your rest period, what's your tempo, what's your pause at the top and the bottom of each one, how fast are you going with each repetition. I was on a mountain bike ride today, and I was thinking, you know, if I wanted to really quantify this ride, I would have to track how fast I was on the trail, the condition of the trail, the gears I was using at exactly certain points in the trail, when I was shifting, my pedal cadence, my body position on the bike, what muscle activation I was using, what sort of position my seat was in, so if I change my seat position. So there's lots of things that you've got to consider when it comes to making sure that you're moving forward. This is why we have things like the Olympic Training Center here in Colorado. When people are like, I just want to be the best athlete in the world and I want to see how far I can go with things like weightlifting or fencing or whatever, they literally have to spend their life quantifying everything. They have chefs prepare their foods. They have to log everything that they do. I had a friend in college who was a master at quantifying her lifestyle. She counted her steps with a pedometer. She counted and logged the number of times she went up the 3 flights of stairs to her apartment. So if we were heading out for the evening and she's like, oh, I forgot my purse or whatever, she would walk back up, get her purse, walk back down, flip out her little notebook, and put another check mark to say, I climbed the stairs an additional time. That's the kind of thing, if we really want to get serious about quantifying things, that's the level of commitment we need. So what does this leave us? Well, quantify the things that are easy to quantify. Okay, so in the bodyweight world, put those markers down on the floor or whatnot. In the weightlifting world, measure your weights and stuff like that. But ultimately, your success is going to have to come from feeling to a certain degree. Okay, kind of getting a gauge. Okay, so maybe you're not keeping a food log, but did you feel like you overate today? Because ultimately, this is the mastery that comes from, well, the skill of fitness. It's kind of like the cook in the master cooks and bakers and everything like that. At first they're measuring everything, they got the measuring cup and they get it exactly right and stuff, but after a while they're like, okay, 2 cups of chocolate chips, and they just take the bag and they dump it in, and they're like, yeah, a little more, okay, that's about right. And of course, it always turns out better than if they were exactly measuring it, because they've got that experience. So quantification is very good, but don't over-rely on it for too long, and develop that sense of feel and touch with everything on how hard you actually are working. Thoughts down below. Till then, be fit, live free.